Hello gamers. Well, this hit us yesterday and it looks to be pretty big. It's a new game from a new studio, created by someone who was both the game director on The Witcher 3 and the head of production on Cyberpunk 2077. Probably one of the highest credits you can get in the RPG world. There was a long stream yesterday, premiering the first game trailer and a few interviews or discussions with the developers, showcasing some of the world design, setting and game concepts. I'll run through the summary of all we know and then let the rest of the trailer and stream play at the end. I'll cut all the fluff, so if you want to stick around to watch, it's all the interesting stuff from the stream. Oh, and before we start, Geralt would encourage you to toss a like to your YouTuber, a sub too. Now let's dive into this.
I decided to open the Revolve company because I felt that there is a huge space for innovation and for evolution in the open world RPGs.
So if you're a fan of immersive single-player RPGs, this has got to be of interest to you. Blood of the Dawnwalker seems to have made waves in the gaming community last night, developed by this new studio, Rebel Wolves. This ambitious title has been on the radar of RPG enthusiasts ever since its cryptic reveal last year, which only mentioned the name Dawnwalker Saga and announced that the publisher will be Bandai Namco. And yesterday, we got all the juicy details. The game director mentions his inspiration coming from Fallout 2 and its open-ended design, where you shape your own story and can approach the game however you want. And then blending that old-school RPG feel with modern tech and dynamic combat. They also mention adding a sense of urgency to the game. That's why time is a key aspect of the game, and your game loop will vary based on day and night alternation. The game is set 2 years after the events of the intro, marking the start of a large saga. The protagonist is a young, emotional guy. He's very different from the typical cynical game hero who's gonna kick ass and chew bubblegum. He's more of a blank slate, discovering the world as we are too. And they actually say he's never gonna be overpowered. It seems like the game loop dictates your abilities. So in the morning, you're more like a human, and at night, you have some vampire abilities. I think this is a bit tricky, because on paper it sounds nice, but if the game loop isn't engaging enough, it might risk feeling like the game is taking away the cool abilities whenever the day comes, for example. I hope they're careful with this one. The story takes place in 14th century Europe, a world ravaged by plague, wars and famine, with vampires quietly observing humanity's downfall. And at its weakest point, vampires step out of the shadows and overthrow the feudal lords, taking over castles and establishing control. The game setting explores moral ambiguity, where players must decide what path to take, as nothing is entirely good or bad. The protagonist, Cohen, must save his family from a vampire lord within 30 days, facing tough choices, including encounters with people who still support the vampire regime. The gameplay is unique in its narrative sandbox approach, where players craft their own experience. There are no defined main or side quests, allowing for a completely personalized journey. This means no two playthroughs will be the same. The developers also discussed the Eastern European influence on the design, blending Romanian, Balkan and other regional elements. The challenge was researching specific cultures and historical periods to maintain visual consistency while avoiding a simulation of medieval life. The aim was to create a world that felt real, yet exciting and a bit supernatural. Magic is also subtle in this world, so it's not all fireballs and Hadoukens, but it's more of a paranormal phenomena, influencing the atmosphere and environment, particularly through lighting and weather. They also mentioned they're aiming for a fresh take on vampires, introducing the concept of growing needle-like teeth that become more pronounced with age. This design, along with the unique mechanism of creating new vampires, was intended to bring a creepy and distinctive feel to the creatures. Essentially, a vampire can pluck his tooth and stick it in your heart to make you a vampire. Nice. Our boy Cohen suffers from Argyria, silver poisoning, that basically weakens him but also protects him from being a full vampire, allowing him to navigate both the human and the supernatural realms. As new creatures emerge from the shadows, they bring their own culture and challenges, creating tension with humanity. The antagonist, Brensis, has transformed the world by enforcing a new order, using religious manipulation and blood rituals to solidify his control. The world is now full of new factions and problems that add to the complexity of the game's narrative. The developers emphasize the importance of creating unique characters with motivation, backgrounds, and goals, allowing players to interact with them in various ways. The game also features choices that affect the fate of the characters in the world, offering high replayability. The narrative is supported by deep gameplay mechanics, such as a blood hunger system, where players must manage the protagonist's need to feed. So basically, you'll need to make friends or allies to further your political goals, but also sometimes you get hungry, so you'll eat them. Same as real-life politicians, essentially. I think that's a summary of all they said. They also said a gameplay reveal will come in summer, and the game is set to come out later this year. But as I mentioned, if you're interested in the whole thing, I'll let it play without me yapping anymore, and I'll cut out all the unnecessary fluff so you'll have the developer conversations, the game's intro trailer, and a little sneak peek at the in-engine footage. Please remember to hit the like, sub, and ring the bell for more gaming news, updates, lists, and commentary like this. Thank you for your time, and enjoy the rest of the video.
I decided to open the Rebels company because I felt that there is a huge space for innovation and for evolution in the open world RPGs. And to achieve that, you need to have independence and artistic freedom. And sometimes you need to make hard and risky decisions. And the best way to do that is to open your own company and make your own choices. Do you remember the second Fallout from '98?
Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite games ever, and I was so excited when you used that as a point of reference because for some time now I've been aching to return to the promise and the value of old school computer RPGs, and to combine it with modern graphics, with bleeding edge tech, with a dynamic, fast-paced combat, merge these two together and see what comes out.
Exactly. And of course, we will not do the post-apocalyptic game. But what was really interesting in the second Fallout is the freedom. You could do there whatever you want. You exit the vault, you have the clear goal in front of you. You don't have main quest which telling you, okay, right now do that, next do that. You just shape your own main story, and you build your own experience. And this is like the total freedom in the games.
Yeah, and as a writer, this is something that excites me about the games the most. The choices, the freedom, non-linearities, and I think this is something that's truly unique to video games. Like, you can't emulate that in any other medium. So I'm so glad that we are making a game that sets out to explore that space and see what new is to be done there. So that's great.
Also, if you will add to that the sense of urgency, the time, which actually is not really explored in the video games, and day and night loop, it would be really interesting because it will make the game different.
Yeah, no, I get that, because the sense of urgency is so important in the context of open world RPGs, where players can become distracted and kind of get away from the main story. So finding a way to make sure that they remain invested, that they remain at the edge of their seats, is so important, and I think it's something that's lacking from the games in that niche.
And if you will add to that the hero, who have the different loop at the day and different loop at the night, it makes the game really unique.
Must be here somewhere. This way! gave us quite the chase, young man.
Please, sir. She's just a child!
Roderick, remind me, did I make an exception for children?
No, sire.
No. That would have been foolish, would it not? They spread the plague just as well as adults. And there's only one way to stamp out this sickness.
No!
Not just a runner, but a fighter, too. Had we met under a different moon, things might have ended
Lunka! My sister. She needs help. Fast. Please, let us pass through. I beg of you. Please. Please. I don't know. How?
I am life. I am death. I am everything in between. I have been watching your little valley. Pestilence, famine, killing, blood spilled carelessly like water. Things will be different now. For all of you.
So the game takes place 2 years after the events shown in the intro, and this is just the beginning of a greater saga we were planning. So we get to meet the character at the beginning of his adventure, which I think is really cool. And Cohen in general is so much fun to write and flesh out because he's not your typical game protagonist. He's not a grizzled veteran who's seen it all, who is cynical about the world, who comments the world with like one-liners. He's a young guy who, at heart, is emotional, he can get vulnerable, he's honest about how he feels.
What I love in Cohen is that he'll be never a superhero. He'll be never overpowered. At the day, as a human, he can fight with a sword, he can use and discover dark magic, but he can be killed by anyone. At the night, he encountered a lot more difficult enemies. He can use some vampiric abilities, not only in combat, but also he can use it to explore the world and to see the world in a totally different way.
Yeah, and he'll need all these cool superpowers because he's facing formidable enemies. This clique of vampires who decided to take over the world, turn it upside down, and set the rules. And they are led by this super old and immensely powerful vampire called Brensis. Our game is set in 14th century Europe, and it's a world in deep crisis. First, the continent has been ravaged by the plague, then wars, and now famine. And all the while, vampires have been watching from the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And finally, when humanity is at its lowest, they come out of the shadows, they overthrow the feudal lords, and they move into their castles.
Vampires ruling the world is not necessarily the bad thing. feudal lords in that time killed the whole villages to prevent, the plague. And the vampires, they defend Cohen and his sister. They even healed Lunka. And, I know that people need to pay taxes in blood, but it's not a huge cost of safe and good life.
Well, to that I'd say that vampires' favors are uncertain. And sure, they protect the people of the valley where the game takes place, but they see them as cattle, so they protect them to then lead them and ultimately kill them. And the blood tax you mentioned, it's taken from everyone, the frail, the weak, the old. Each week they have to convene at the church for a blood mass. So for some people, that's deeply traumatizing or might even end up in them dying. So in the end, I'd say the balance is more or less equal. And that's something that I actually really like about our setting, this world, that nothing is simple, nothing is just black or just white. And you have to decide for yourself, like, what do I think is the right choice? What is the path I want to take? And what is the path I want to avoid? And ultimately, Cohen's family ends up in the dungeons of the Vampire Lord. And even as Cohen is trying to free them, he will meet people who still support the regime.
It's even more challenging for players because Cohen has only 30 days and 30 nights to save his family. In most games, sandbox means gameplay freedom. In our, it means narrative freedom. We don't think about the quest like the main quest or the side quest. We just have quests. Players will craft their experience through the game by themselves, and nobody will have the same. And we call it narrative sandbox.
Yeah, that's something that really excites me because that means that no two playthroughs will be identical. That each player will have a unique experience. And that's the true magic of video games, and that's why I love making them.
Man, look at this place. That would be perfect for the writing team.
Not just for them. I love storytelling myself. Since I can remember, telling stories through images is what I love to do.
Yeah.
So when I received the first script for the Dawnwalker, I fell in love with it right away.
I think for me, what got me was the concept art when I first saw those Carpathian villages hugging the mountain slopes, the valleys, forests, and then also the muddy streets of Svartrau and the long shadow of the cathedral. It all felt very authentic, muddy, and also very familiar, homely, and, well, Eastern European.
Not just Eastern Europe.
No, yeah.
It's a mix of predominantly Romanian motifs with broader influences of Balkan cultures. Mm-hmm. It gave us a freedom of creation. It's a vast range of inspiration from Polish log houses to Ukrainian or Balkan clothing to Romanian defensive churches.
That variety and that broad spectrum was also interesting to get because I never thought as an environment artist I would have to learn in Romanian how to Google specific museums just to get the references.
On the other hand, we also set a boundary for ourselves, and that boundary is a time period of inspiration ranging from the 13th to 15th century. Mm-hmm. And this is meant to ensure the visual consistency of the world.
Yeah, and that is also quite a challenge to make sure that what you create is authentic, grounded, and has a real sense of place, but at the same time isn't just a picture and invites exploration and promotes that gameplay.
I wanted to see how far we could push realism so that players truly feel part of the narrative. But this is not a simulation of medieval life.
Not at all.
Realism can be boring, and we wanted to create something exciting. And that's where the magic comes in.
Yes, the magic.
Our magic isn't filled with fireballs or flashy lights.
Yeah, it's probably even more interesting to get right than the realism part of it, because when a quest brief comes through and the magic is manifested by, I don't know, birds flying in the sky in a strange formation or the northern lights not being in the north, it really makes you rethink the whole location and how it should come together to marry those two aspects.
Our magic is also serious and it's closer to paranormal phenomena than to traditional spellcasting. It's like the X-Files set in the Middle Ages, all deeply rooted in the history of the Dawnwalker world.
Yeah, and I think it's the weather and the lighting system that do majority of the heavy lifting to take a location and really push it one notch above realism to give it a slightly off feeling. I think my favorite location for that is the cathedral. During the daytime, it's that monument to Gothic architecture with people bustling around. And then as soon as the sun starts setting in and the streets clear, the fog starts setting in, and it becomes a completely transformed, different area, very spooky, almost liminal, cemetery-like space.
And that was also a very early and conscious choice on our part. We wanted the world to be a different place after the sun sets.
Right, so hold on. Environment art is something I understand, right? I do it every day, I understand the creative process behind it, but I've never touched anything to do with character art, which is your speciality. So would you mind walking me through what was your creative process in coming up with that whole thing?
Sure. So we approached the work on vampires very seriously. It's a whole new universe. What's even better is that it's a mix of familiar elements with a fresh twist. We all know that vampires are well-defined in pop culture and have been around for a long time, so we wanted to create something fresh. So what primarily sets them apart is their teeth. Our vampire teeth keep growing throughout their lives. The older the vampire, the more teeth they have. So instead of two sharp teeth, they have a series of needle-like fangs, densely growing from their jaws, often emerging from different parts of their skull as they age. The teeth keep growing because the vampire can use them to create another vampire. And the mechanism is very simple. The vampire pulls out his fang and drives it into the heart of its victim.
Lovely.
So what's interesting is that our vampire's teeth aren't visible at first. They can extend as the mouth opens, and it looks really creepy.
Yeah, I still remember the first time that the animations came through from the character art team, showing the mouth opening and the teeth growing, and it was absolutely disgusting. I loved every bit of it.
So Cohen's Argyria, the silver poisoning he got when he was working in the mines, is both a blessing and a curse. Because on one hand, it weakens him. On the other hand, it protects him from becoming a vampire fully. So, you know, he gets to traverse both worlds, both the world of humanity and the world of the creatures of the night.
Yeah, well, he was kind of used to dealing with the vampires since it's been like a couple years since Francis took over. Now he has to find a way to deal with things like undead lurking in ancient tombs that should have remained closed. Kobolds that used to only prey on miners going way too deep into the mines, or even Uriashes, who used to live high up in the mountains, secluded, and now they are in Francis's troops.
Yeah, and they are vastly different.
Oh yeah, they all have their own separate cultures, and well, if you want to deal with them, I would kinda like to you should get to know them a bit, or else you might get tricked, because they all have their own goals, aspirations, now that they came out of the shadows in Francis's wake.
It's a source of a lot of tension, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of tension. Some of them can cooperate with humans, but mostly it's just new issues, new problems nobody had to deal with before.
But I think this is great because all of that tension, all of these problems are great storytelling material for us, for building all of that content. For example, Francis, he had to normalize this thing for the humanity, convince everyone this is the new normal.
Yeah.
And the way he did this was, first of all, you know, there was a lot of social turmoil. And on the other hand, a lot of deeply held religious beliefs. And he twisted them. He turned himself into this messianic figure. So, for example, he introduced these blood masses where he feeds a human vampire blood, right? And at the same time, they have these other things like punishing criminals with like draining them dry.
Yeah, but, well, you know, some people actually liked it because once Francis came in, he set up a new order of things, he finally got down to business, and then he locked the valley off so that nobody can touch it, no outside influence can touch it. And, well, some others did not like it so much, and they began to reach into the depths of forgotten magic, occult, stuff like that.
Yeah, so either way you look at it, the Vale Sangora will never be the same again.
Not a chance. That is a lot of world building, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. There are so many things we need to remember to make this into a cohesive whole. And at the same time, you have the challenges posed by the open world itself. Because, you know, there is a risk of the content being formulaic or repetitive. We handcraft all of it, and we focus on telling these unique themes we really care about.
Oh yeah, we want to talk about loss, about the meaning of family, about opposing tyranny, about trying to coexist with creatures you've never had to coexist with before.
Well, but that would be difficult to do with just Cohen and Brensis, right?
Impossible, actually. We had to create a whole host of characters, and we really wanted to avoid having cardboard cutouts, like without motivations, without backgrounds, goals, and ambitions. But, you know, when you meet those characters, your goals and ambitions may overlap, and you befriend them, or it might be the opposite, and you go on a warpath with them. But, you know, given the goal that you have ahead of you, it might be good to have some friends to go along with.
Well, but you could go on your own, right? If you wanted.
Well, yeah, you could just grab a sword and go storm the castle.
Yeah.
But, you know, it might be wise to, for instance, find the rebel cell and try to dismantle Brensis' rule with them. Or, I don't know, listen to what an agent from outside of Bales and Gora has to say.
Which is exactly why I love how we structured the game, because we offer a lot of choice in which characters do you want to interact with, which you might want to skip altogether. And also on top of that, you have this layer of non-linearities where you can decide their fates, but also the fate of Cohen and his family.
Yeah, and I really like that because it gives us so much replayability. You can always choose a different path. There's something else waiting there for you.
Yeah, exactly. And also, on top of that, you know, get to find all these secrets of Vale Sangora and fill all the blanks and, you know, explore the world.
And yet another path might be lurking within that.
Handcrafted content is all good and well, but on top of that, we also have a number of really cool gameplay systems that further feed into the narrative.
Yeah, and speaking of feeding, my favorite one is the blood hunger. It lets me play a real vampire. I don't just have to drink blood to use my cool abilities in combat, but if I talk to someone without feeding first, I might just lose control and I might eat them. And it's not going to be just any random peasant that I won't care about. I can eat my best friend, and I will break my heart, and I will break my quest.
Yeah, so you better keep him well fed.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have a fave?
Yeah, I really enjoy the ones that are revolving around Brensis, because like it makes him this active antagonist. You know, this means that he will basically react to what Cohen is doing. He will pass these edicts that will hinder your path. So, for example, he might set up military checkpoints that will be on your way.
It changes the world, right?
Yeah, exactly. And also, you know, it's not just him running the show. It's also his 3 powerful vampire allies.
Yeah, when I saw them in CGI, that was such a hype moment. Finally animated, voiced, and just loved it.
Yeah, and on top of being cool characters, they also have their own like spheres of influence, and you get to dismantle their organization step by step, making it simpler for you to confront Brensis and free your family.
Well, when it comes to freeing your family, there's one more antagonist, that is time itself, because every time you do something important in the game, when you complete an objective or you complete a quest, time moves forward.
Yeah, but what I really like about this also is it's not like real time. You actually get to control how much of this resource you want to spend, right?
Yeah, you have to manage it wisely, but if you just want to enjoy the view or just take a stroll, you can without stress. But once you get down to business, you have to do it smart.
Yeah, so I think all of these things combined, handmade quests and the gameplay systems, create for this really fun, unique experience.
Yeah, and you know what? I cannot wait to see what shenanigans players will get up to playing with those systems. I will be there watching it.
Same.
As you can imagine, last 2 years were really intense for us. I want to thank the whole Rebels pack. You are the best, and it's a privilege to work with you. The Blood of Dawnwalker is a very special game for us, because it's first truly ours. What you have seen so far is only the beginning. In upcoming months, we will share more with you. But for now, I have one more surprise for you.